Hey everybody, it's episode 171 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast. What are we talking about today, Victoria?
You have to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Devin.
You already introduced me. I'm so ready. Can I just say, so this is for Crosscheck, the third Blackguard book.
Yeah,
I've been thinking about this literally nonstop the past 5 days.
it's written by Phil
I've
Lawler.
been at work just wanting to talk about this book, and the thing that's kept me going is the fact that I now know Richard once worked at a pizza place too, and you have no idea how often that thought's been going through my head. I have so many problems in my life right now, and they're all because of this book. I I have done rigorous amounts of research
I
to
can't believe
prepare for
you
this
actually
episode
rewatched old
the
videos of
past
ours. I'm so impressed.
the past couple days. I have re-listened to our past two Blackguard books so I could get a recap on everything that happened within the past two books. I will be going over some of the things because I know Devin's forgotten some of the stuff.
Yes.
I'm really glad I listened to it because I forgot a ton of stuff.
I'm really glad too, because Victoria's like, did you
I
remember this and this? I was like, no.
Yeah, I was texting you because I was thinking like I gotta text these specific things.
My
Otherwise,
phone was
I won't
going
remember.
wild at work today.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
I was texting you because I knew you'd actually see the texts and you wouldn't see messages
Yeah.
until way later. I took so many notes in my Kindle, some of them very embarrassing that Devin probably had a good laugh at.
All I saw was the highlights.
Yeah, I know. You probably laughed at some of the highlights.
Oh,
'cause they were really
absolutely I did.
embarrassing. You'll probably talk about that later. I was thinking of all the highlights mainly that I took of literally any point when Richard was
and
touching
Connie
Connie's
interact.
body,
Yeah.
and I highlighted it.
Yes, you did.
And then Devin started reading the book, and he was like, "Oh, I can see all your highlights." And I had this moment of mortification, and I was like, "I'm not gonna unhighlight
It was
this.
like-
I'm gonna commit."
It was like when Tumblr first said, like, hey, everyone else can see your liked posts now.
Yeah, I
Um,
was so mortified. Okay. What
Okay,
else
I wanna
I
say-
did?
sorry, you had a thing you were continuing on before we get... First, I want to say I was right. From 2 episodes ago when we talked about the
Oh.
Wit books, and I was like, I bet
We're
that...
gonna get to that.
I was
We're
like,
gonna
I
get to
bet that this professor is Professor Mongol. And then I forgot that there was even an initial last time. But again, Blackguard's like, old
We're gonna get
Professor M. And I was like... And
We're
then
gonna get
the
to
fact
that.
that he has the maps clearly shows he wasn't just concerned with archaeology-related things. He had stuff related to Odyssey, which means he was... This old professor man was specifically obsessed with John Avery Whitaker. Because he is Carl Mongol. I
We're gonna
told
get
you
to that.
I was right. Is that what you were talking about when you first read the book and you were like, I can't believe
I'm
you've
looking
done
at the
this,
messages
Phil?
right now. I took okay, like I was saying before, I have Skype messages in my history of me live reading the book. I have all the highlights in my Kindle. I went back and listened to Mrs. Hooper, did a transcript of one of the scenes, color coded the transcript, went back to the first Blackguard book, highlighted bits from the first Blackguard book of that same scene
I'm so proud
to
of you,
compare them.
'cause
I'm going to send you the
this
things so you
is-
can put them up on the screen once I talk about them. Wait. I took texts about and messages and notes about our past two Blackguard books and like things we predicted and things we didn't predict, and I memorized the rest, and I re-listened to Bad Company so I could talk about Rachel from like a more informed light, and I re-listened to the scene of Encounter with Mrs. Hooper where Richard has a couple lines and he talks about Rachel on loop like 50 times. I am so flippin' ready to talk about this episode. You have no idea.
I'm so proud of you. You did the same amount of work that I did for the Wit Books review when I was like lore diving.
Did a stupid amount of preparation.
That is
for
a
this
shocking
episode.
amount of work. Even I've never done quite that much for something that wasn't a lore video.
I'm so worried I'm gonna forget about a lot of the things I'm gonna say because I'm actually like shaking a little bit. I've been bottling up all this energy ever since Friday night, and okay, so let me see. So 1:14 a.m. Friday. I'm broken. The AIO books have broken me. That was the moment I saw the words Professor, the word Professor M, and I said, no. And then I went back, because I deleted the Wit books from my Kindle, because I didn't want them on there. The Blackguard books are allowed, though. And I had to re-download the second Blackguard book,
I got to that,
scrub through it until I found the name of the dang professor. I saw Professor Mangle, and I just started screaming, and I haven't stopped screaming since. I posted that Vine where it was my relationship with Phil right now is I can't believe you've done this. And I was just imagining Phil whacking me in the face, because that's what it
Does
felt
the guy
like.
in that Vine really, really look like a young...
He looks like Anakin.
Sorry?
He looks like Anakin to me.
Oh, I always thought he looked like Pippin.
Oh, he looks like a combination between Billy Boyd and Anakin.
Yeah. That's what I always thought of.
I'm trying to find...
Yeah, it's funny because you highlighted that section, and the Professor was like the last line on that page. So when I got to that page, that was the first time I saw a highlight. So my eye was immediately drawn down to the middle of the page, and like the only thing on that line is like old Professor M, and I was like,
what was your reaction?
I was like, I was right.
I highlighted a lot of foreshadowing.
And I was like, that's absolutely what Victoria was talking about on Skype, because she highlighted it here, so she knows I was right.
I highlighted a lot of foreshadowing, which probably made things a little less fun for you. I'm sorry about that.
No, I just thought, I didn't realize they were foreshadowing. I thought that was the only thing we were going to get about Richard's like sad, abusive past story when we got that, because you already sent me asking about it too.
We're going to talk about that. See, the thing is, Devin, I sent you all those asks about Richard's family before any of the stuff about Richard's family actually came up.
Oh, wow. I figured you sent it to me after Blackguard slammed him into the wall.
Okay, that is when I sent it to you.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, because he was like, because it said Richard started shaking.
Yeah.
And I was just like, Richard has an abusive past. And I started freaking out. Okay, so other notes I took on Skype, I'm just going to read these because they're going to get lost into the void later on. This book is just feeling my Connie Richard heart. I've been waiting ever since the book started, and I realized how good they were going to be, to read the scene of them meeting, because I really, really love the scene where they first meet in the Nemesis. It's like dripping with like suspense and stuff like that. Phil Lawler said Connie Richard writes. I'm right.
I thought you said Philip Glossman for a second.
No.
Philip Glossman said Connie Richard writes.
Do you ever think about what would have happened if Connie accepted Blackguard's job offer? Because I think about that all the time. I don't think it would drastically change things. She would definitely eventually go back to Wit's End, but it would have made Album 5 and every future Blackguard episode a lot more interesting. She could have told them the password for applesauce. I doubt she would have gone that far, but she knows it, assuming it is Jenny.
Which, as I've said before, it has to be just on a narrative level.
Yeah, that message only grew more impactful to me. And everything I wrote just predicted what was going to happen later in the book. I was really proud of myself, because the entire, freaking, crisis Richard went through in the latter half of the book about protecting Connie, which I'm never going to get over. Connie's just very shippable for me, even though there isn't necessarily, any person I want her to be with except for the Mothman, who is my boy.
Who's Jeff also.
Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. I'm upset they cut out the line where Connie said Richard was good looking. I mean, why leave all the other stuff in if you're going to cut that out? What's the point? Why do this to me? What else?
I have a question. What was the joke I said
JFK
about
and Martin
the horses?
Luther King's names mixed up. That's unrelated. I just thought I'd throw that in there. How old is Richard supposed to be? I went back to the second book review we did. Throughout the entire thing, I said, I don't know how old Richard is supposed to be, but I'm going to go off the assumption he is 19 years old. And I said that multiple times. This book confirmed he was 19 years old. So... Yay for me.
What was the horse angel joke I made that was the reason we started recording?
So
here's the fun thing is, normally I edit the episodes, and then I send message to Victoria being, like, quoting, like, the funny things that we said.
Yeah, and now it's the other way around.
And Victoria's finally letting me know about the funny things we said, like, last year that I've forgotten about.
Yeah, so you were saying that you don't blame Lucy for, like, doing all the bad stuff she did in Connie Goes to Camp, because when Connie was writing the letter to June, she was just, like, describing all the girls, and then she's just like, I'd be worried about Jill hanging out with, like, one of the other girls if it wasn't Lucy, because Lucy's like an angel and she's perfect, and you're like, and Connie says she's a horse, so she can't do anything wrong or something like that. Like, the untamable, beautiful power of a horse is contained within Lucy. And I was, like, dying laughing, and I was like, that's a retro joke. No one's gonna get that. And you're like, we literally just reviewed Angels and the Horsehair last episode.
It's still funny. I forgot about that whole thing. And, like, I want the McElroys to review that episode.
It's really creepy that Richard flirts with Lucy now that we know he's 19 and she's 11.
We always knew there was a huge age gap. It was always creepy.
The fact that he's 19 and Connie's 16, like, kind of creeps me out. It's
already creepy enough, yeah.
And, like, the fact that Lucy is now confirmed 11, which we also have Donna and Rachel are also 11. I want to say before I forget, early on in the book, when, I guess not early on, but, like, when Tom and Whit had the scene where they're, like, brushing Rachel and Leah's coats, and then I was just like, oh, Rachel, and then at the end of the book I was like, oh, Rachel, no!
I had the same thought too. And I was like, Rachel.
It was so horrible. It was like the John Mulaney, like, yes, no, it was like, Rachel! I was in so much pain. Oh my gosh.
What also, Victoria, what happens in this book?
Okay. Oh frick, what do we know about Richard's parents? Like, anything? Blah 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 blah. He has a line or two at the end of Homecoming about going to see them before leaving Odyssey again.
That's what I said. I could be wrong about that.
And then I said, no! And you said, shut up. And then I said, new OTP, Richard in the Zapazoids machine. I heard the machine has a crush on him.
It's still very funny.
I was laughing because it was horrible, but, like, Richard was, when Blackard confronts him in this book, he's, like, pressed up against this Zapazoids machine.
I know, I was like,
one, foreshadowing, but two, I, like, finished that scene and Richard's, like, shaking, and he, like, curled up on the ground and I was dying, and he's, like, huddled against the Zapazoids machine, and I was like, at least the Zapazoids machine is always there for him. Whenever he's upset, it's the only thing in his life, the only constant.
It's true. There is a point later where Richard is very upset, and the Zapazoids machine is also very much there for him.
Even when he doesn't want it to be.
Yeah.
What are salt licks for? That's another thing I wrote.
Yeah. Okay, Victoria, what happens in the book?
I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, those are all the messages I sent you. Okay.
That doesn't cover the text messages, but it covers the Skype.
No, it doesn't cover the text messages or the highlights in the Kindle, but I will get to those.
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to get the messages out of the way on Skype. So in this book, which I know why they call it the Blackard Chronicles, it's because it's always from the villain's point of view and never from the hero's point of view. And I'm renaming this Richard Maxwell the series, because in the second review I commented, hey, this book was actually a lot more from Richard's point of view than any other character. He was basically the protagonist, which was the exact thought I had coming out of the third book. So this is basically Richard the series, and I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
Because it's the best thing I'm going to get, because they're not going to bring him back to the show present day.
Nope.
So I will definitely take this. My hope is when I'm 90 and they finally get to, like, album 25, I'll finally be able to read the perfect send-off that Richard deserves.
And then after that, they're going to get to I Slap Floor.
Don't. Hey, what are the albums in the Blackard Chronicles album set? Because we said that we would look at them and we never did in past book reviews.
It definitely
bring it up?
It definitely has one bad apple in it. Yes, I can do that. Definitely has One Bad Apple. Definitely has Code of Honor. I think it has a Rathbone of Contention in it.
Okay. So it has 30 album episodes.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
Does not have a lot of the episodes they go over in the books. So after the battle, we're gonna get one.
Doesn't
Bad
even
apple,
have Connie Goes to Camp in it, which is
and that's
interesting
gonna go to
because the
Wei
whole
Wei.
thing with Lucy is very important.
And then we're gonna get the Homecoming. I'm gonna cry so much in that one.
Oh yeah, Double Trouble. I'm really curious.
I'm excited for the Edwin stuff.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Edwin hasn't been mentioned yet from Blackguard's like internal perspective.
Maybe they're trying to keep it a surprise in the books.
So yeah, that's the thing I was about to say. The books are mostly from Blackguard's and Richard's
Blackguard's Revenge is included. I didn't want it to be.
So, Victoria, do you think that these books are intended in part or at all to be like accessible to people who have never heard the Blackguard saga in their original form before?
I think they work without hearing the albums.
Because I would have thought
I think they work even better with hearing the albums because the thing is, these books are extremely well written. They like don't spend too much time delving into the scenes from the album. Every time it does scenes from an album, and it
basically
like,
goes in real time. They're so fast through those bits.
Yeah, it basically more or less just does. It cuts down so much on the descriptions.
Yeah.
And it does dialogue, and basically the only descriptions are of what the characters are physically doing, and it adds so much. I think at one point I missed this reading the Skype message, but I said at one point, like, I'm enamored with reading about the physical actions that all the characters are doing during the scenes, like Whit and Tom talking to each other, and Whit being all fidgety and just like flicking a bit on the saddle as he's talking and stuff like that, and like Blackguard winding up to punch Richard in the face when he's confronting Richard. I never thought that scene got like anywhere near that intense just listening to the audio version. Like, for all I know, it didn't, and it's just that way this time. We're going to talk about some of that stuff. You talked to Phil right before we did the first book review a little bit, and you asked him a lot of questions. I don't know if you remember doing that.
Yes, I do.
Not. Okay. And he said that these books are intended canon. So I'm going to take it as they overwrite the audio episodes, and these are the more superior forms of the stories. So these are the true canon versions. And we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we should
in regards to a certain Rachel and Richard because of that, which I will get to, trust me. But first we need to do the recap of book 1 and 2.
Yes, really because we're already 19 minutes in.
Dude, this is going to be long.
I know.
I'm not even going to pretend it's not going to be.
I know.
Okay, so book 1 opens with Glossman in his office. He is thinking about Lizzie. He almost quits and walks away from Blackguard. Blackguard calls him, tells him he better sit down. He threatens Lizzie and says he knows where her location is. Glossman gets to work. Connie and Eugene find out about applesauce. Glossman comes in and kind of tricks Connie / convinces her. You and I likened him to the snake in the Adam and Eve story.
Yes.
Into going and activating applesauce. This all happens at the same time that an encounter with Mrs. Hooper happens. Richard is robbing from all the people at the retirement home, including Mrs. Hooper.
Mrs. Richard Maxwell.
He builds up Mrs. Hooper to Donna so that she'll be more scared, so she runs out sooner, and then Richard steals jewelry from Mrs. Hooper on his way out right after Donna leaves the room. Right after that, Richard is picked up by Glossman and Blackguard, taken to Chicago.
They took him
Blackguard's
to
already in
Chicago.
Chicago. And
I'm so glad they finally brought that joke back. There have been so many times when there's been a perfect point. I was like, make a Chicago joke, and they haven't, and they finally brought it back in this last episode. I'm so
happy.
Not talking
so
about
everything
this
happens
for
with
the audience.
applesauce.
Oh,
Connie and
Kaz.
Eugene are fired. Richard, my stupid, beautiful boy, thinks that Glossman took him legally and just wants to talk about councilman things with Richard. And then the book ends with Blackguard's name first being said.
Yeah.
The second book opens up
What's a slow burn?
Yeah, the second book opens up with that same scene. And
Richard Connie slow burn 300k.
Yeah. The second
Rare
book
pair.
opens with that same scene. Richard gets hired by Blackguard. He's going to be his tech person. We get a little bit of Blackguard's point of view for the first time. We hear about the prophecy. We hear about the man who, you're going to want to hear this. We hear about the man who Dr. Blackguard studied under. He was a professor who was very old and succumbed to a disease that he was very upset about getting. And he said that there was something that someone had that was a bit of cloth that could have stopped him from dying, but he didn't have it. Then he died. He had a piece of paper that Blackguard could not translate, but he could translate because he knew how to translate it. And some of the last words on the piece of paper were John Avery Whittaker's name. He gave it to Blackguard, and then he died. His name was Professor M.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty incontrovertible.
Yeah, I was listening to us talking about it, and
that
I was like,
really specific.
How did we not remember any of this? This is literally, like, I get it was 2017.
It's so
like,
specific.
It literally spells out every single thing that's going to happen with the Young Wit books, and we both forgot all about it. It's really funny because
it's so funny that I was like, controversial opinion. Yeah, that random old man is Professor Mongol.
No, it's definitely Professor Mangle. It is very clearly spelled out. Like, it is unbelievably
That's so
spelled
specific.
Out. I know.
I can't believe he actually said, like, he was obsessed with a piece of cloth that would heal him from the disease that he got.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I said it later in my notes.
He didn't say heal, but he said, like, if I had this, I wouldn't be, like, sick and stuff like that. I would be better. And he was very specifically bitter-seeming, it sounds like,
that
towards Wit.
It was really interesting when you factor that into the fact that he mentored Blackguard, whose main goal is to get Ruku.
And
the mineral. And specifically not just Ruku, but the mineral, so that he can... And I think I brought that before. That Blackguard's goal is to get the mineral, which can be used in a number of different ways as a catalyst, including curing many different diseases.
So, let me just say, you said this man was probably involved with missions work in the Middle East at some point, and probably had, like, a scholarly background that connected him there to some point in his life, which is true about Professor
not missions
Mangle.
Work, but religious archaeology, yeah.
Well, yeah, archaeology work, but you were still right about that in your predictions. And me just say, we are very static, you and I, in terms of, static in terms of our reactions to this, because you thought it was the funniest thing you'd ever heard, and I was very upset. So that hasn't changed at all.
You were so angry when I proposed the idea that, like, the Blackguard books were all working to connect to the Young Wit books.
See, the thing is, I was upset because I realized you were probably right.
I know.
And then I was just waiting for Blackguard to, like, re-mention the professor, so I could double check. And yeah. So
see, it's funny because
inconsequential.
When I saw him mention Professor M,
inconsequential.
Incontrovertible.
What's the word? Yeah. So we have complete proof that this is Professor Mangle, and I can't.
It's German. Mongol.
It's unbelievable.
It's funny because when I saw the Professor M thing, I was like, well, that's all the proof I need right there. And then you tell me all of that, which is just like...
You remember what
leagues
I
and
said,
leagues
that there
above.
were things you would want to hear about
I
his
figured it was
death?
about that, yeah.
Yeah, but you didn't think it would be this specific, did you?
Oh, no.
No, it is
That's bonkers.
100% just verification after verification. It is Professor Mangle. He's the one who trained Blackguard.
This is so
He
cool.
he trained him up in his footsteps to be bitter against White. And you know what this probably means? This probably means his son's gonna die at an early age, and he's gonna
See,
grow
that's the
very, very
interesting thing.
bitter
I talk
towards
about it
White.
later, but this kind of gives us insight into what is going to happen in the coming
Yeah.
Whip books.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. So, like, his son's gonna die really early on.
We'll
He's
talk
gonna
about later.
find
Tell
out
what
that Whit
happens in
has
the
the
books,
claw.
Victoria. Finish your recap.
Okay. Are you upset that you don't remember any of this?
No, I'm upset that I want to talk about my notes also.
Okay. We find out that freaking Myron was listening outside when Connie and Eugene were fired and heard the entire
Yeah,
applesauce
I forgot about that part.
conversation. We had a joke where we said if you listen hard enough in
You can
a
hear him
bite
in
of
the background.
applesauce, you can hear him in the background breathing. So he tells Blackguard or Glossman that or whatever. Glossman and Richard are supposed to try and get like all this stuff with Webster. There's the curse of Old Man Webster, which
Oh my Gower.
Yeah, Old Man Gower, which I had a really funny thing I said about that, which made me laugh a lot.
Made me laugh
What
as
did
well.
I say? We learned about the building. We learned the building that became Blackguard's castle was cursed by its previous owner, Old Man Gower, who is now my favorite character in all of Odyssey. So you and I were upset because the curse was that all the different businesses in the mall that were there would do very poorly business-wise, and all of them did except for the one business, and that's the one that got
Mansfield Computers
this time in this book. And so you and I were upset because we were talking about like how curses are supposed to be disproven in Odyssey, except for this one is completely proven.
It's
because
very
every
funny.
bad thing happened.
When they said,
to quote what you said, Mansfield, like everything else has already gone bad. Mansfield's gonna go bad because it's gonna go out of business at the height of its popularity.
Yeah.
Blackguard's castle is going downhill, and the Electric Palace is the Electric Palace. You and I are very funny. Can I just say?
It's like, when I first read that, and it's like, oh, Old Man Gower cursed the land, and now every business fails there. And I was like,
it was really
that
funny.
is literally the funniest piece of lore that we've ever received about Adventures in Odyssey. I love all of these novels so much. They're the best thing to ever happen to Adventures in Odyssey.
So I'm looking at notes on my phone. Glossman is supposed to deal with Gower, and Webster helps him with that. Richard is supposed to get the job at the college. He uses the money from changing the grades to compensate for the money he's not getting from pawning off the things from the retirement home anymore, which I forgot about like literally all this from the first two books. And Eugene tries to apply to the computer store
because Glossman
sees him, and in a moment of heartfelt sincerity says, "Hey Eugene, you should apply to the college because they want jobs there." And then he thinks, this is what Lizzie would want me to do. And then, as you loved reminding everyone,
I take it back.
The
businesses aren't cursed. The curse landed squarely in totality upon Philip Glossman.
And as you loved repeatedly saying over and over and over again in the second book review, and then his follow-up thought after he told Eugene this was, hey, Eugene might also be a useful ally while I'm at it, I guess. And so Glossman basically screws over all of Blackguard's plans because Eugene gets the job instead of Richard. Richard is mean to a girl at the recruitment desk who is telling people about the thing for like helping out with the kids like Nicholas, and then he charms her and is a jerk and gets in on the program. There is a great scene where Richard and Glossman are talking to Blackguard, I think like over a computer or something like that, or the phone, and Richard is telling Blackguard that he didn't get the job at the college, and Blackguard is furious, and Glossman's just sinking down in his seat, and Richard is staring daggers at Glossman because he can tell this is somehow his fault. And Richard thinks, I'm going to get revenge on Philip Glossman, and we still haven't seen what's going on with that, so I'm excited to see where that goes. I don't know if anything's gonna...
I'm really glad, like, I love how you didn't read the books again, you only listened to our reviews, and I'm really glad that we did such a good job.
Very big depth.
I'm glad that we covered in so much detail that you can recap it this well from it.
Okay,
It lets me know that we're doing a good job at informing people who haven't had access to the source material.
I'm really glad that I actually remembered all this. I'm surprised I remembered as much as I did.
So much. This is a lot of detail.
We have the letters with Connie and her mom explaining what happened at camp.
Yeah.
Connie has not very much room in that book. The book is mostly from Eugene and Richard's point of view. Mostly from Richard's. Let me see. The professor is called Professor M in the second book.
Yep.
Eugene finds Richard very familiar every single time he sees him.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
And he thinks about that in like a lot of depth, and you and I spend a long time trying to figure out why that might be. Because Richard didn't recognize Eugene. Richard had never met Eugene before.
Right.
So.
Eugene used to live in Chicago. Richard used to live in Chicago, so it must be something to do with that.
I don't know. Okay, those are all the notes.
There's something that I don't know if you picked up on that I think is being actually implied and is not just a crazy headcanon that I came up with. And I'm curious when we get there in this book to see if you picked up on the same thing.
Okay, I put a timestamp for this. I almost put a timestamp for
and I'll
some
trust
of the things
any crazy foreshadowing now at this point that comes up in these
books.
Yeah,
definitely.
There's nothing is out the window now anymore.
If anyone wants the timestamp, it's 26 minutes and 35 seconds because our album or book reviews were very long. I said, I want to find out about Richard's home life in book 1, and then present he was like, oh, sweet summer child, you are gonna cry.
Can we recap this book?
You said 32 minutes into I just remember that off the top of my head because I almost typed it out, but then I didn't do it. I can't remember how many seconds because I'm a hack. You said Richard probably, because you and I were trying to figure out his timeline.
Yes. In
the first book review. You said Richard probably spent a few years in Chicago before coming to Odyssey, and I said, no, I don't think so. So you were completely right. I thought you might want to know that.
Thank you.
Those are all the notes I have on my phone. Now it's just the notes for this. I have so many notes, and then the notes on my computer.
Finish recapping what happens in this book.
So how does book 2 end? There's all this stuff with like Eugene's dilemma.
Eugene gets rehired.
Yeah, Eugene gets rehired. This book, it opens up with Glossman, and he is... What's he doing at the beginning of the book again?
At the beginning of this book?
Yeah.
Richard and Glossman and Blackguard are all talking about their plans and stuff.
Okay. So it starts off with Richard and Glossman and Blackguard. They're doing that stuff. They're talking about everything. Glossman starts getting all the stuff set up with getting the land for Blackguard's castle.
Yeah.
And
since we're kind of doing this in the reverse order where you have all of the notes that's kind of more helter-skelter, and maybe I should insert my notes as you're going through the recap just so I can like get them in.
Okay, and then I just go through all my notes at the end?
Well, as I get through stuff, then you can continue recapping once I'm past the scene. Maybe that'll make things more linear. So in the opening, I thought Richard was in really top form in this scene in terms of
Richard's in top form for this entire
Well, I mean,
book.
like, in terms of just...
Oh, wait, I forgot to mention, in the second book, after riding in Glossman's car, Richard canonically, which I hate, I don't know if you remember this, wears very, very strong, cheap cologne, and it coats, the smell coats not only Glossman's car, to the point where Glossman says, I need to sell my car. It also coats Glossman and his clothes, and he says, I need to burn my clothes. because the smell won't come out, and other people notice, and it's so funny.
But also very eye slap floor too.
Yeah, you said that before, and
Yeah.
I somehow didn't
Okay.
catch up on it. And I got upset.
In the open, I just mean like Richard is in top form in terms of like getting under Glossman's skin. I was like, I'll be surprised if Glossman doesn't have an aneurysm by the end of this scene. It is, but like I said, it's amusing just how much the tech side of the story has aged in the last 30 years. Shockingly, it's very out of date now. It's also the second time in these books that Glossman has been described as unctuous, which is, I don't know why I said that weird, unctuous. It's still the most fitting adjective for him in the English language, I think.
Is it the word you had to look up in the first book?
Yeah. That means like a kind of
Like
oily, greasy film.
Stuff, yeah. I remember because we talked about it. And
yes.
I know so much more about this than you now.
I know.
Are you jealous?
No, I like it.
Okay.
I enjoyed the flipping the script like this.
I'm the more knowledgeable one for once.
Yes.
Which never happens.
Well, especially like all the AIOC episodes, you don't watch any of the web docs and WebQuest, for example. Like there's stuff even by default that like you just don't take in as much information as I do about stuff. I really like. Still, I love how much the books are tying Mrs. Hooper into the saga because it's Richard's only episode, which is ostensibly unrelated. And I'm just living for the depth of this whole Gower's Landing subplot because it was previously just completely absent from the narrative.
They did say in the second book that Richard said he thought that the man who owned that building, he had a relative in the retirement home. You and I never put together for 1 second that it was Mary Hooper.
And you know what I did realize while we were in this video? That Donna does say in an encounter with Mrs. Hooper, she goes on the phone and she asks the operator to connect her to Barbara Mansfield.
Yeah, I realized she would have said the last name in the episode.
Yep.
But we never got any of those bits.
We never put that together. Book. Yeah. Also, I don't know where you are now, but Blackguard is you can get up to where Blackguard's exploring the building.
My first highlight is just the Professor M.
Which is there. That's this, yeah. So Blackguard explores the empty mall, and he's trying to come up with a name for it.
Oh my gosh. This bit, he's like...
It'll have to be named something
Sasha,
like Palace.
Fortress is too masculine, Palace is too feminine, and I was like... Castle is just non-binary enough to work.
But also, the first suggestion is Palace. And he's like... And also the fact that he's
is that what was happening? I never...
Well, he does that, but also, it is the Electric Palace later on.
I never thought of that. I never put that together.
I first thought that was supposed to be what it was, and then he's like, no, that's too feminine. And I thought it was just an Antero dig at Bart.
I thought he was just doing a thing because he was like, Fortress is too masculine,
well, yeah, but
Palace is too
the first thing
feminine.
he said is Palace, so it starts out as an Electric Palace thing, and then over the course of the next 5 pages, it turns into a Goldilocks kind of
Can you imagine if it was called Blackguard's Fortress? I'd be like, you're so pretentious. Get out of town. Leave. I forgot to say in book 1 there was a lot of stuff from Recollections, and it was all from Glossman's point of view, and he longingly stared at Whit and Jenny looking at each other's eyes, and he was like, I wish I had that.
It's so depressingly funny.
He's so sad and miserable. He just wants to be with Lizzie. He's longingly staring at his pocket watch, and he's like, I hate my life.
It's literally his whole character now. Okay, so...
I just want him to come back to the show, which you and I said he has an accidental redemption arc in book 2 because he gets Eugene the job.
Blackguard goes down into the basement. I was like, clearly there's gonna be some secret passage, which on the one hand is ridiculous and absurd.
A map.
But I was like, listen,
all the secret tunnels.
I was like, I guess he does have to have that because he has to have somewhere that he escapes during the fire, right? There had to be some sort of secret passage even before all the weirdness of these books because he does this go into the basement.
Doesn't he just run out the door?
Sorry? I thought Richard said that he went into the basement and then they're like,
he does. And then Whit opens the door and he yells after him, but he
And then they never find a body. So we're like, clearly Blackguard tunneled under the
Okay,
building. Like,
do you remember from a couple episodes ago when we said the answer to all questions in Odyssey is the tunnel under Wit's End? I was like reading and I was just like, well, what do you know? The answer is the tunnels under Wit's End.
Okay, so Blackguard has a list of all of the infinite tunnel. It's like the Paris
It's like
sewers.
Disneyland.
It's like the catacombs under Odyssey.
It's like the catacombs or Disneyland. There's just tunnels everywhere.
He has a map that's called Odyssey Passageways, and it's like, I'm glad we're understanding how Blackguard escaped the fires, but why is there an entire network of tunnels all over town? The Underground Railroad only involved the church, so I assume the rest of these are probably Prohibition era, and Odyssey just had a real bad drinking problem back then.
Old Man Gower needed to have a hobby. He just had a lot of spoons, didn't know what to do with them, so he just dug a lot of tunnels. Yeah. I just want Old Man Gower to be like a crazy prospector. That's what I imagine
he basically was, and I mean, he was pronouncing curses on the people who took his land.
I love him so much.
The best character that we never hear from. And, like, we know that there were different, like, moonshine operations and illicit Prohibition era stuff going on in Odyssey. But, like, here's the weird thing to me, Victoria. Never mind that there's tunnels all over Odyssey, and Blackguard knew about the tunnels under Wit's End. The tunnel that he has access to right now from the building he owned connects to the Wit's End tunnel somehow. And, okay, first off, Wit doesn't know about it. Maybe it's, like, shallowly blocked off and he just has to break through some dirt to, like, get through to the Wit's End tunnel.
Use Glossman as a battering ram to break through the tunnel.
Listen, Blackguard already knew about the tunnels under Wit's End. It adds a lot to his, like, planting of the bomb and down there, his initial speed to investigate them when the good doctor, like, swept in there as soon as Jason made them known to the city. But, like, for what purpose does Blackguard need a secret laboratory, a secret Frankenstein lab under the thing? Why does it exist there? Is he already trying to, like, work on stuff with the mineral? That's what the lab would suggest. But if he is, then, like all of Darkness Before Dawn was exclusively and specifically for the purpose of getting access to the tunnels under Wit's End. And he has that right now. There's a bunch of tunnels all over town. He could just use them. He has direct access to the tunnels under Wit's End right now, which is what he spent all of Darkness Before Dawn trying to get. So he must not know that that's what he's after at this point, because he has that right now. That's his entire end goal, and he has it already.
There are some pretty big retcons that I'm going to bring up later on.
Oh, I want to know,
so
does this tunnel collapse? Does he have to blow it up after him during the fire or something? Because later on, even in Before Darkness Before Dawn, he wants to get in those tunnels. He works real hard to get into those tunnels. Why couldn't he use the same tunnel again? Because this building is later going to become the Electric Palace, which he has access to because Bart owns it and was going along with his plans. If it still exists, he could have gone into the basement of the Electric Palace, into the secret lab that Bart maybe still has under the Electric Palace, and, like, gone and, done that. So the note about Professor M, yeah, I wrote, it's interesting because, like, the fact that Professor M, that Carl Mongol got his hands on a map of tunnels under Odyssey is beyond me, unless he spends the rest of his life dedicating to stalking Wit after he leaves Providence, and also tells us that he never gets resolution regarding the healing cloth in these books, which is confirmed by what you said from book 2.
I think his son definitely died.
Definitely, yeah.
At a very young age. We don't know what happened to the other son. I don't know if Carl went crazy.
It's like dyspraxia.
His wife might have taken the other son and left.
That would make sense because her husband's crazy and she hates him.
Carl is definitely by himself.
We never talked about it in the book review. I was really surprised at how, like, hateful their relationship was portrayed towards each other.
The husband and wife? I don't really remember that much about the wife.
It was, like, cold. Like,
okay, they probably
They were
get
not
divorced.
sleeping on, like, the same floor of the house.
Okay, yeah, they definitely get divorced then. Or maybe she just leaves, considering it's ye olden times. And
that's a lot more probable.
Super no-no. So I'm thinking that Mongol's definitely by himself by the time that he encounters Blackguard.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is we don't have, like, the time period.
No.
For how old Blackguard was and when they met, so we don't know how long they were together, which kind of sucks.
I'm sure we'll get more about this from one series or the other at some point. Do you think
You
they're
know what?
going to
There's going
stop
to be
being
a
a separate
ton of it
series?
probably.
They're just
There's
going
going
to
to
be
be a
titled
ton
the
of
same.
it in 25, I bet.
Here, Victoria, just think about like how Professor Mongol, back when Wit was like 9 years old, Harold and Wit were both like, man, this guy's nuts. Like you can see how crazy he is, right?
No, that was like such a good part about the Blackbird book, or about the Young Wit book, because I thought Harold was going to be like, don't talk to him that
That's
way.
absolutely
But
what I expected.
Harold
Yeah.
was just like, oh no, he's insane. Yeah, don't go near him.
So if Carl at this point is like that, imagine he finds out that Wit has the cloth. He has stolen it by the end of the second book.
Quick,
and then he loses it.
Who do you think has the cloth currently? Because it disappeared.
Yeah, probably Carl, right? I imagine.
I have no idea.
I guess it could be someone else. But, like, here's the thing, Victoria.
It could be that little boy who keeps on appearing and disappearing.
It could be that, too. Trying to protect it from Carl or something. He loses the cloth, and then, like, I don't know, 40 or 50 years maybe go by.
More than he has before.
He spends decades stalking this child throughout his entire life trying to get the cloth back. Imagine how crazy really he is by this point. That's when Blackbird meets him and is like, boy, this is the guy that I want to learn from.
I want to think, do you remember that scene I showed you from Puss in Boots where it's like Humpty Dumpty?
Yeah.
Just like following Puss everywhere he goes. I want to think that's Carl Mongol following Wit throughout Wit's entire life. Like, we do flash forwards in the Young Wit books at the end of the series in like an epilogue, and it shows like Wit like getting the shrapnel in his leg and he's like swimming for the shore, and just like you see like bubbles come up behind him and with like a lily pad strapped to his head and just like a reed in his mouth, which is like
he's like Jeremy in The Secret of
and then
Nim.
he just like sinks down, and then he's just like Jerry's birth, there's like a baby shower or something like that, and then you see like Mangle in a dress and a wig, and he's just watching everything just like throughout Wit's entire life. It's like, I was there, Wit. I was there for it all. So I just need someone to redo that scene from Puss in Boots with Mangle and Wit.
It's the things like this that just make me wish so bad that this was like a visual series so that we could edit in visually just like these scenes from all the like Wit flashback episodes, and he's just there in the background ominously. That's why we just have to make these jokes about like, oh, this character's in the background, you just can't hear them because they didn't talk.
And then find all the album artwork of Young Wit.
See, I thought about that, but we have to also come up with an appearance for Mongol, so.
I feel like that'd be a fun thing to do one day.
So funny. It's so funny. I forgot about the Puss in Boots thing, though. That makes it a lot funnier visually, imagining that. I'm going to put that scene down in the description so everyone knows exactly what we're picturing and how funny it is. Oh. What happens? Keep on going through what happens in this book. So they have the meeting at the beginning. Blackbird looks through the building, and he's like, oh, yes, I have these secret tunnels. And he sings the Secret Tunnel song from Avatar.
Secret Tunnel.
And then he's like, perfect. A Victorian-era laboratory. Exactly what I needed. It's hidden in the basement, behind a secret door.
As you do.
As you do.
This episode review is going to be so long. Book review, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's going to be very long. We haven't even talked about Richard yet.
Nope. We're going to have to pause the recording and resume it at a point just so it doesn't, like, get corrupted.
Probably. Do you want to do that now?
Sure. Let's pause this here. This is a little intermission, just so y'all can, pause it, go to the bathroom.
Go watch that Puss in Boots clip.
Get a snack, go watch the Puss in Boots Humpty Dumpty clip, and then
it's only like 15 seconds long.
No, it's more than that, and then we'll be back here in just a second. Okay, we're back from intermission. So, do we get up to the council meeting, the first business meeting? License meeting? Is that okay place to be?
I think so.
Okay. So, something that kind of confused me. Wit comes up and he pulls out the sheet of paper and, he reads off the goals for Wit's End that he read in Recollections, right?
I really like having things from Blackbird's point of view, by the way. And I find it really interesting.
It is very interesting.
This book was 95% from the villain's point of view.
Yeah.
It just kept on going. Blackbird, or like Glossman, Blackbird, Glossman, Blackard, Richard, Glossman, Richard,
Blackard, yeah.
And then, like, Connie and Tom and Whit at one point.
And only
once.
ever for the absolutely required, like, these are in the show, quote directly, quote for quote scenes.
What was the point when you realized we were probably going to see, like, Tom's barn burning down from Richard's perspective, and we were actively going to see him do it?
It was when Tom drove away from the barn, and it said he didn't look in the rearview mirror, and there was a shadowy figure, I guess.
Really? I realized, like, in the middle of the book, maybe, like, even
I didn't really
close
think
to
about
the beginning of the book, when I realized how much Richard point of view there was, I was like, I'm gonna see Richard burning down the barn. I don't know about you, but that was super, super intense for me to read. Like,
his whole shirt caught on fire, and then the whole kerosene container blew up right beside him.
I read this book in 2 sittings.
He even tried to not burn down the barn. They're like they're going very heavy on the sympathetic angle for Richard in the early stuff.
I think I read about like 33% the night you bought it, and then the next day I finished the entire thing. But I had to like close my Kindle for a minute and take a break when the chapter started of Richard burning the barn down, because I just like needed to breathe for a second.
Richard risked his life to save those horses.
He did.
He ran into the burning barn to save them, and he never tells Tom that.
I know. I actually really like that. I was thinking about that because I was thinking Tom wouldn't want to hear that. That is literally the last thing Tom would want to hear.
Okay, so anyways.
But I realized partway through the book, I realized we're going to see Richard actively burning down the barn. 2, I realized as we were getting more into the Richard backstory stuff, he's probably going to A, try to save the horses, B, try to save Tom, C, make the fire very small, and he did do all those things, and I was so proud of him.
He did all those things. Okay, so at the first council vote, Whit comes up and he opens the paper and he repeats the classic, like, blah, 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 arts and crafts, kids can just be kids speech. The weird thing is that he talks about, many of these were my wife's last wishes, and then he reads the paper, and Blackard comments on, like, how the writing on the paper is, like, all feminine handwriting, which, combined with what Whit just said, implies that Jenny wrote this statement. But it starts out by talking about, like, this is what Whit's End should be. And Jenny wanted to reopen the Fillmore and not open a business that she named after herself or her husband. So my best guess is that either Whit has really particularly feminine handwriting and the timing of the phrasing is weirdly misleading, or more likely, she did write all this stuff. She wrote all this stuff about the Fillmore, and then Whit just kind of like replaced the name at the beginning of what he was reading. So the handwriting is.
I mean, I think he just like did a little editorial on what it said.
Yeah, but he didn't. But the paper itself is still something she wrote in her own hand, is what is implied.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, what did you say while I was speaking? I missed it.
I just was basically agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. So Connie talks about her experience at camp. You know, I never thought about it before, but it's interesting that Connie, after being fired by Whit, went and got a job as a camp counselor at Camp Whatnot, because that's also working for Whit.
He doesn't own Camp Whatnot.
Does he not? I'm pretty sure he does. And because then I thought, I was like, wait, am I 100% sure that Whit owns Camp Whatnot? I've always been pretty sure that he says that at the beginning of Camp Whatnot. They're like, don't you own this camp, Mr. Whitaker? And then he
wait. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think Connie didn't get the memo about that.
And I mean, granted, he doesn't take a super crazy active role constantly in Camp Whatnot. He's really, I think, more of the property owner and sponsor.
Obviously not. He hired Connie again and never realized it.
Yeah. I don't think he's the manager there. He's just like the owner and kind of the sponsor of what goes on. But I literally never thought before about the fact that Connie was still working for Whit.
That's really funny, actually.
I like the fact that Whit is such he owns the whole town, and Connie can't get a job anywhere without working for Whit in some capacity, unless it's working for Blackard. Also,
Okay,
on the topic of those scenes, because
uh,
those are the scenes where that we're getting directly cut from the episodes, I absolutely agree with what you said to me on Skype, that it's so great to learn like the blocking for all these scenes where we already know
mhm.
every line heart by heart. Now we understand like the blocking and context and the
I'm such a
costumes and
nerd
the
for the
movements, and
blocking
it's
in
like
these books. It's very
I
good.
like it. It's cool. Also, sweet Fortnite reference that Phil made in there.
Um, I Now we get to the part where Richard and Connie meet, and I'm Connie Richard trash,
Uh huh.
and I highlighted every single instant I thought was kind of cute. I
Hmm.
highlighted every
I know
single
you did.
moment where he touched her arm
Yep.
or something like that, or said something nice to her, because I'm awful.
Hmm.
Like, he sidled up next to her, his mind racing. What if he could get Connie Kendall to join them? What a coup. She could tell us all sorts of things about the place. And Whitaker, too. And maybe it'll make Blackard forget about the other stuff he wants me to do. And my heart broke by the end of that.
Yeah.
And then I didn't realize he was talking about the barn
Oh,
specifically
I
until
knew that
the
part.
next scene. Um, no.
Uh, Building on that same kind of area of scenes as you look for your next bit.
Yeah.
I've always
Oh,
thought,
him reaching and grasping her arm softly. Stop, he said. Listen, like I said before, I can get you a job with my boss if you're interested. And I was just like, ah,
yeah.
I'm
So
off.
when
I'm
Connie's
trash.
when Connie's talking to Blackard, I've always thought it was funny. Richard corrects Connie about the Dr. Blackard thing, like about how he's a doctor, and she says, "Oh, are you into medicine?" Not, she doesn't ask, "Are you in medicine?" or "of medicine," but she
We're
says,
like, do you like
she
medicine?
says, "Are you into medicine?" Like, yeah, I was vibing with philosophy for a while. Then I experimented with some anthropology, but I'm really into medicine these days. Like, what a weird like conjunction to use.
Um, Maxwell gave her forearm a gentle squeeze. It'll be great working with you, Connie. She looked at his hand, then at his face, then at Blackard's. Blackard ruining the moment for them. Okay, can I just say, I never really got why Connie just like instantly ran out of there in the scene, like when Blackard offered her the job. I
Yeah,
totally like I knew that she wanted to work with Wit.
yeah,
So I always assumed like that was the main reason she left, even though she was being offered a job.
yeah.
And also because the place looked like kind of sketchy.
It's
But the
so
descriptions
sketchy.
in this was just like, this is literally the sketchiest place ever.
Yeah,
It looks like a burial ground
I was like,
indoors. And Blackard is like saying all these menacing things, literally never blinking, staring daggers into Connie the entire time. I was so uncomfortable reading it.
he yells at Richard
He's
for
like
interrupting
snapping
him
off to
without
Richard.
breaking eye contact with Connie.
Just constantly staring at Connie. I was like sinking down when I read this. I was like, I'm so uncomfortable.
Connie, your mic is hitting your thing.
Oh, yeah,
Connie
sorry.
probably thought he was a vampire, like the beginning
Probably.
of Twilight, when Bella's like, "I know what you are, Dr. Blackard."
Say it, a child psychologist.
Like, honestly, I've always thought, like, oh yeah, it's. I thought it was kind of weird. Like, I didn't quite understand the level of Connie being like, "This is creepy. The building isn't finished yet."
You know, and then she just like, he's like, yeah, you can go. He looks out the window and she just like is bolting down the street. And I was like, yeah, I would do the exact same thing. That was creepy as heck.
I've always thought, like, I mean, I wouldn't really call it creepy that the building isn't like all furnished yet, but like now that we're like, it's a mall that has been gutted. The lights are all off, and Richard's like, "Here, step into my parlor, person that I met 10 minutes ago." And Connie's like, "Okay." I'm like, Connie, why would you go in there with this man 3 years your elder into this dark, abandoned construction site building? Because he says he wants you to meet his boss, and you just met him. Like, Connie, this is very bad survival instincts that you have.
I always thought of it like as she thought he was friends with Eugene or something.
I mean,
like
yeah,
that.
I guess that is what she thinks, but still, Connie,
And like,
this is
Wit also
very
recognized
sketchy.
Richard.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
Yeah, that I did think about that. I was like,
Yeah.
Connie knows that he isn't just some out of town rando. She knows.
Richard.
She knows.
I felt like Sorry, I thought the POV was gonna swap, like when Connie and Wit were talking to each other, but no, Richard's just like listening at the door with his ear against the door. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
The thing I thought was, not only does Connie know that Richard is someone that Wit and Eugene both know, but she also knows that Wit and Tom know that she is with Richard just a couple minutes before, so she knows that if she gets murdered, that they would know that it was Richard's fault.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
so now we kind of start Richard's arc, his mini arc in this
and
book.
as Connie leaves, I've always thought, from the episodes in general, that the single most insidious line from this whole episode is Blackguard's Whittaker's hold over her is still too great. It literally sounds like
he says that in the episode too.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, like, even from the episodes, I've always thought that. It's the single most insidious line. It literally sounds like something a Sith Lord would say. His hold over her is too great.
I mean, they do say things like that.
Yeah, I know.
Every time I think about the Sith, Jenny Nicholson ruined me, because I just think of, like, dark, strong force, dark passions, or whatever it's called, like the Yoda Dooku story. I can't believe that's a real thing. I can't believe that's real.
So, beginning of Richard's arc, yeah, to lead into that, like we said before, we have the Death by Zapazoids foreshadowing. And that's when I first wondered, like, I wonder if there's anyone reading these who's never heard the episodes, because that would be really weird, because it's, like, all from the villain's perspective, and so they already reveal a bunch of stuff
I love it.
into it.
So the beginning of Richard's arc for me...
It's the same as A Series of Unfortunate Events, the Netflix series. We probably made that comparison in the first two reviews, I imagine, yes?
Mm-mm.
Okay, yeah. It's basically the same thing, where it's like, here's the stories you loved as a kid. Now we're going to readapt them with a lot more detail, and it's told a lot more from the perspective of not just the protagonist from before, so you can understand everything else going on behind the scenes that connects all the events you saw previously.
But I really like it. Honestly, I like it more this way. So, like, I always like to think that, like, Richard actually really strongly wanted Connie to work with him, but that was just me being shippy. But the books were like, no, that actually is a thing, except for it's a lot sadder reason why he wants that, is because he was hoping that if he brought Connie in, it would distract Blackguard from wanting Richard to burn down Tom's barn, which shattered my heart.
Well, I think it's less
he
about
thought that like he could get Connie to drag Wit and Tom away from the council meeting, so Richard wouldn't have to burn the barn down.
Exactly. It was less about distracting Blackguard and more about being able to use Connie as an alternative to the burn plan.
But like Richard actually did want Connie to work with them.
Yeah.
Which he goes into, and I was like both living and dying at the same time, dying 1,000 deaths. Maxwell's face fell. Blackguard hadn't forgotten after all. That line broke me.
So have we gotten to the sad? I mean, you already talked about it when Richard's like shaking.
So the ferocity of Blackguard's attack caught Maxwell completely off guard. He backed up against the Zapazoids machine. Me starting to highlight all the foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Colliding with it hard, bumping his head against the side, and nearly toppling it. After Blackguard finishes threatening him and almost punches Richard really hard, but then doesn't, and he leaves, and he's like, "Don't let me down," and stuff. Richard trembled. It took everything in him to stop it. For a moment, he thought he would pass out. This is the moment where I start realizing that Richard grew up in an abusive household.
Yeah.
He finally regained control and whispered, I won't. The incident was evoking in him memories he had long suppressed, and he didn't like it. He rubbed the back of his head gingerly and winced, sank to the floor, and glared up at Blackguard with a deep frown. I'm like dying and screeching the entire time I'm reading this. Dad's about to watch Detective Pikachu at work. He spelled Pikachu Picathu. Anyway, he glared up at Blackguard with a deep frown. Blackguard chuckled and patted him on the cheek. I was like, "Don't you touch him." Oh, don't have such a long face. This should be a lot of fun for you, Richard. After all, it's not everyone who gets to ruin two of Odyssey's most powerful men at the same time. He threw back his head and laughed long, loud, and deep, and turned and headed back to the private door, calling out, Sasha! The cat emerged from the two large boxes and lobbed between the room to join him. They both disappeared behind the door, leaving Maxwell huddled against the game, shaking. And I was just like, I'm shaking too! What just happened? Like, what was your reaction to this scene?
The same. As soon as that happened, I knew immediately that was what you messaged me about. Because I was immediately like, oh, abusive past, implications, sad, crying time.
I was so upset. I'm going to take this off. I'm really hot.
The next thing that you highlighted after this, I don't know, maybe there's more lines about it.
Are you looking at my highlights as you go through this?
No, but I made a comment about it. Because I remember you highlighted it, and that's why it stuck out to me. I would have stuck out to me either way.
Let me see what it was. Where am I? Oh. Yeah.
About Agnes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost messaged you and said something like, ooh, something new to add to the Tom lore, 'cause a couple weeks ago, like you and I said, or I said like, update all the lores, you said update the Tom lore, and you said there's nothing new to add to the Tom lore, and I said, well, you don't know about that, and this happened. I was like, if I say something about Tom and Agnes, Devin will literally kill me, so I didn't say anything.
Yeah. It also lets us know that Agnes has a sister.
Yep.
So I'd never honestly thought before, where is Agnes during all of this? Because she's not at Hillingdale yet. So it's like, hey, Agnes should probably be...
I highlighted this. I was like, Devin's going to be so
present
happy
for all of this. So I thought that was really cool. I was really glad that Victoria highlighted Tom picking hay off his shirt to put in his mouth.
It was important.
And then later...
Like, out of all the descriptions, you have, like, with, like flicking the thing, and it's just like, Tom's just like, hom.
Well, it's so funny that he, like, it's on his shirt, and he's just like... And then you didn't.
Food.
I don't think you highlighted this part. Like one page later, he like takes it out of his mouth so he can spit on the ground and then put the straw back in his mouth again.
I did not highlight that. You were correct.
Okay.
No. I did have the thought. I was like, I could highlight the Agnes bit, or I could also highlight Tom putting the straw in his mouth. I'm like, both are equally important.
Okay, so. Now we get
how you can see my priorities and the way my mind works. It's all like foreshadowing, shipping angst, clever things I noticed in references, and then just really dumb stuff.
So now we get to what was, to me, the single most interesting part of the book. And also to Victoria, but I think for different reasons. So we'll
Wait. Oh, are you talking about the elusive chapter 11, I believe?
Probably.
Or chapter
I'm talking about Richard's backstory.
Chapter 10. Can I just say, I think that chapter 10 is the best writing I've ever seen come from Phil. Like, and I'm trying really hard not to be biased in saying that. I legitimately think, like, taking a character like Richard, who has a very undeveloped backstory and stuff, we don't really know anything about his past.
Yeah.
And then just, like, doing this kind of thing, he single-handedly, within the span of a chapter, made Richard one of the deepest characters in Odyssey. And I was, like, floored. I was so impressed.
It is impressive how quickly he did that. Okay, you talk about Richard's chapter first, and then I'll give my thing. The only thing I want to add first is that in addition to unctuous, the series has now taught me a second new word, which is wonk. Because Richard describes his biological father as an early computer wonk, which I had to Google. It is an informal derogatory term, meaning someone who is, like, obsessed or highly knowledgeable in a subject.
Okay, so
and I've never heard it before. I assume that it is something that hasn't been spoken aloud until now, since the 90s.
So, for the quick, in a nutshell, Richard's timeline, because that's what we get for this entire chapter, it's basically just Richard sitting in a booth at Wit's End, thinking about everything that's happened so far, and just reflecting upon his life and how he's gotten here to this moment. And it's so, so, so good. Richard was already one of my favorite characters. If he wasn't already, this definitely would have made him one. I also realized, like, you know how I'm always like, I don't have a character type that I like the most, and you're like, yeah, you do. I was thinking about it, and I was like, Wellington, Jay, maybe not Jay anymore, Jared, Richard, and I was like, maybe I do have a type. They're all kind of garbage, but I love them anyway.
But
Okay,
you're going to
so
redeem them whether the show wants to or not.
yeah. I want to claim I'm Richard's number one fan, but I don't think I am because I know there
No.
are people on like Tumblr who write stories about him and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
there's
I'm
people.
Not even gonna claim
there's
that.
people on Tumblr who have entire blogs dedicated just to Richard Maxwell.
Yeah, and
which is impressive in 2019.
Where I sit is I have a claim on Wellington, and no one can take that away from me because no one would ever want to.
Yeah, why diversify your profile? You know.
Mine. Yeah. So, basically, Richard's parents, when he was very young, split up, and
he was 10, I think, at the time.
I can't remember how old he was. I don't think he was 10 yet. I think he was younger than that, but I could be wrong. Richard.
Oh, we found out we were wrong this entire time. I've always said, based on the very reasonable assumption that they have different last names, that half siblings, Richard and Rachel, which is not true. It was just that Richard decided to keep his father's last name, whereas Rachel, with her mother, reverted to her mother's maiden name. But they are full siblings.
I got confused about that.
So Maxwell is his dad's last name, and that's what their whole family's name was when they split up. His mom changed their name back to her maiden name, which was Woodworth.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel went with that because she was a kid as well. But Richard, he probably went to Woodworth, and then later when he went to live with his dad after like his mom and he fell out, he decided to change his name back to Maxwell when he moved to Chicago with his dad.
Okay, so Richard was, how old did he say he was?
I thought he said he was 10-ish, maybe 9.
He was 11.
Okay.
He was 11. He was 10. Sorry, he was 10. And because there is a 8-year age gap between him and Rachel was 2. Mm-hmm. So they go, what was the guy's name?
Osgood Brownlow.
Yeah. What was his name again?
Osgood Brownlow.
Okay, so Brownlow is this kind of like con artist-y guy who got in with Richard's mom and started like dating her and stuff like that. And he raised Richard to be a con artist, but Richard, and like a very manipulative person, but Richard didn't really realize that until he was like older. And then Richard also realized over time that like he was raised to be like very manipulative against others and hurt others and stuff, and he didn't really want to be like that, but that was the only way he knew how to be and how to provide for himself and his family and like take care of himself. So he didn't know like how to live any other way, so we just kind of had to roll with it. And then he found out that Brownlow was cheating on his mom with another woman and also stealing jewelry from his mom and then pawning it off at a pawn shop. So then Richard tried to get him caught and get his mom to find out about it, but the guy who owned the pawn shop pretended that he didn't know Richard, and they pretended
he admitted. He was like, I don't know this kid, he didn't sell me the jewelry. The pawn shop guy corroborated Richard's story, but she still didn't believe it.
Yeah, but like they didn't believe it, and then Brownlow, he convinced Richard's mom that Richard was the one who stole the jewelry and pawned it off. So then Richard was basically kicked out, and he was, how old was he?
17?
He was 15.
Okay.
He was 15. He went to the bus station and took the next bus to his father's place in the Windy City. He was 15. I never even told Rachel goodbye. That line made me so sad.
That line made me sad.
So he was 15. Rachel would have been
7.
8-year age gap. She would have been 7. So he went and lived with his dad for
3 years. It was his
how many
18th
years?
birthday.
3?
Yeah.
Okay. So he lived with his dad for 3 years in Chicago, taking many different jobs.
He went down to
One was
Chicago.
a pizza place job, which I've been thinking about that every single day at work without fail. Whenever I'm bored, I'm like, Richard did this because I'm trash.
Richard held this pizza knife.
Okay, he was a busboy. He did pizza delivery. He was a janitor. You probably noticed my highlight here. I lost my mind here. He even did a stint on the maintenance crew for the sanitation department. He hated it, but he learned how to get around through a bunch of service doors down the sewers, which would come in handy if he ever needed to move about without being seen. And I was just like, putting in that foreshadow. I did a little foreshadowing dance and I highlighted it.
Also, Victoria, though, do you consider this? He would have worked with Chicago deep dish pizza, which is like, so kind of.
You've never had Chicago deep dish pizza.
Just looking at a picture of it is like so off-putting.
He's not the one who made it. He delivered it.
Yeah, but it's like, here's a gallon of sauce with a little bit of cheese and toppings and bread.
So then one day Richard goes home. Can I just say, Richard 100% definitely has abandonment issues.
Oh, yeah.
I'm guessing. So one day Richard goes home. His dad's just not there. There's basically just like a letter and a bunch of money. And it's just like, hey, I up and split. And here's money for you. I enrolled you in Campbell College. It's this place in Odyssey. Have a good life, champ. He doesn't even say that. Mm-hmm. He's just kind of like, goodbye. And Richard's kind of like, that's pretty close to where Rachel and my mom are living. I'm not really sure. He doesn't even call her mom. He just calls her by her first name. Yeah. He's kind of like, I don't really know if I should, but it's also like schools already paid for me. It would be, and the kicker for him is it would be close to Rachel. And my heart is just like, oh, but that is not the worst of it that we've even gotten to yet, because it gets even sadder somehow. So Richard goes down and he lives there for a bit. He reconnects with his mom and Rachel. He finds out that jerk left his mom, so he helps support them. Mm-hmm. And then one day, his mom just disappears. He was with his mom and Rachel for like the past year. During that year, his mom split. He becomes Rachel's guardian, basically. Yeah. Like an unlegal guardian.
An illegal guardian.
Which is the part where we come to the saddest bit, which is the bit I've been hyper-focusing on ever since I read this book, and the reason why I listened to Bad Company immediately and did a bunch of color-coded highlights from different things from the encounter with Mrs. Hooper, because they talk about Rachel in that episode. Yeah. But the thing is, I guess I can talk about this now. So, first off, he mentions being happy when Donna became friends with Rachel, because Rachel was kind of given the same education Richard was about like how to be a con person by their not dad.
Yeah. Oz good, more like Oz bad.
But the thing is, Rachel was never good at it. Yeah. She basically just stole things without any regard for not being caught. It was just really crappy at it, unlike Richard.
That's basically what happened in Bad Company, yeah.
It is what happened in Bad Company. She gets her purse searched. There's a ton of stuff. And Donna's like, what the heck? And then she yells, run, Donna, and bolts out of the store. And then Donna comes up and she's like, why did you leave me there? And Rachel's just like, I'm not going back. And then she's like, I guess we're not friends. She's like, guess not. See ya. And also, Rachel mentions her parents in that episode, which was something I want to address. She says, because like she's talking about church with Donna, and she says like, oh yeah, my folks used to go to church. We used to all go to church, but then I stopped going, and along the line they stopped going too. And I was like filling gas right after that. I like turned off the phone, and I was like at the gas station, And I was just trying to figure out what the timeline for that line was, if it was retconned.
I mean,
Like,
the answer is probably yes, obviously. But
probably, but
if we
I
had
couldn't
to
imagine
justify
what's-his-face
it,
going to... I mean, it would be what's-his-face and her mom.
yeah.
Not her bio dad.
No,
Definitely not.
obviously not, because she's 2.
She would have been
I've decided, I by virtue of me pooping my diaper, I've decided not to go to church today.
So
no, I guess
don't know.
it could make sense that Osgood was going with like their mom in order to kind of help like the
scam her
the
and
facilitation process of
which
the
I
pawn.
did think of that.
Yeah.
Which means Richard would have gone to church at one point in time, probably.
Probably.
I want the series to end with Richard becoming a Christian so flippin' bad. That's always like my main gripe with Richard's character, is that he never became a Christian at the end. Because I feel like all the setup was there, but it just didn't happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I never understood why he didn't. I felt like that's the road it was like leading towards.
I don't know. I kind of like that sometimes. That it's like not every character arc has to inevitably do that.
I know, but still it bothers me. Anyway, so the shoplifting thing happens in the book timeline. Donna and Rachel stop being friends.
Yeah.
And then right after that, Rachel gets caught again.
Mm-hmm.
And because Richard is her guardian, but isn't a legal guardian, he's only 19 years old, and he does not have like the proper means to support both of them, she went to juvie. And she is still there to this day. And my heart is completely broken. And now I can send you those things that I made. So you can put these up for everyone to see. So you'll see that I did a little mini transcript from the book and also from the Odyssey episode. And I highlighted in blue all the lines that they cut out. The red underlines are all the lines that they kept from the episode. So if you look at the encounter with Mrs. Hooper dialogue between Richard and Donna, it cuts out all mention of Rachel, which was where I was confused because judging by the timeline of this past year and layout from Bad Company to Mrs. Hooper, Rachel should have been in juvie, and if not, it would have been mentioned within the books, her being sent to juvie.
Yeah, that's why you're asking me about the timeline.
Compact, which means they retcon these lines in blue.
Yeah.
So that Rachel's already in juvie by this point.
Thank you for going into
you're welcome.
Checking on this.
Do you appreciate my little sleuth work?
Yes, this is very good work, Victoria.
Thank you. I had I realized it when I was in the shower this afternoon because I was listening to the scene a bunch and I realized there was something wrong with it. And then I realized only because I listened to the Blackguard book reviews that we never talked about Rachel at all in the first 2 books. And I was thinking we probably would have. The only thing we talked about was just very just general mentions of her in Bad Company. But I realized I did not remember us mentioning Rachel at all in the Mrs. Hooper bit. And then when I got out of the shower, I checked. She is completely lifted from that part. She's in juvenile hall already. So that makes the timeline line up properly.
Yeah. Okay, is that everything you have for Richard's sad story?
Let me see. Do you appreciate all the hard work?
I do, very much so. It was very impressive.
Thank you. When I texted you and I was like, and now I'm transcribing and color coding stuff.
Yeah, I read that. I was like...
But don't you appreciate that I did that?
I do, very much so.
I wanted to line up the timeline because I knew something was wrong. So
it's funny because when you were like, here, I've underlined and color coded this cross analysis, and I was like, okay, what weird thing do you think you picked out? And then you said it as I was looking at it. It was like, you were 100% correct.
Thank you. I feel very validated by this because I feel like this is a very good thing to point out.
Yeah, and it's rare that you have a hunch that you take the time to like look stuff up like this on, and then
I mean, it was really quick to check.
I know, but then
so.
you still have to type it out and stuff. But then it actually turns out to like be worth the time to do it. Sorry.
Let me see where my next highlight is.
Also, so Greg Kelly enters the picture. I talk about him during the flashback. We also find out Jellyfish's last name
because I totally forgot who Greg Kelly was. I was like, I know he's in Waylaid, but I can't.
Yeah.
Oh, Greg Kelly, he's the nervous boy who's played by Jack.
And then he dies. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he dies. That's who he is.
And we find out Jellyfish's last name, which is Horowitz.
We didn't know it already?
We might not have. I don't remember.
I
forgot he was in the last book altogether. We definitely don't know it from the audio series. We only knew his first name was Myron.
Okay.
Are you past chapter 10 or whatever? With your notes?
Okay, so back to Richard and Connie, because...
Well, we're past... I want to talk about the backstory thing then that I had.
Okay, yeah, then keep talking about that.
So,
I'm moving on to
as it happened... At first, I was writing notes that pertain to it. I didn't even realize that's what it was. I was just pointing out.
Dude, we could do a Richard's lore video.
I feel like it's too condensed, though, already.
Yeah, but still.
The whole point of the lore is gathering so much disparate information, bringing it together. This video is already that. So, at first, I was just pointing out interesting things about locations and lore, as I do in my notes. And then I had a hunch. And I was like, but it's dumb. I'll make a dumb joke. And then it grew to enough proof that combined with how weird these books are about tying things together, that I was like, this might actually be legit. So we find out Richard, when he was young, he lived with his mom and Osgood in Millsburg. And I was like, oh, Millsburg, that's where Felicia Larson lived, and Buck's parents, and it's just next to Harlanville, which is where Buck and Fullhouse were born.
Are you going to say, like, Kelly's mom is, like, Richard's mom?
It's not Richard. Or not Richmond, sorry. Richmond is where Kelly's from.
Oh, okay.
Millsburg never appeared until, like, 2 albums ago. It is where Felicia Larson lived. It's next to where Buck and Fullhouse were born, which is Harlanville.
If you're going to say, like, Buck is Richard's sibling, I'm going to murder you.
Listen to me.
Dude, I was having such a good time with this episode, and you're going to ruin it.
Listen, I know, I was like, Victoria's going to hate this.
Oh my gosh,
then I was like,
you're going to say
wait a minute,
that Buck's dad is what's-his-face.
So, Richard is like, there's this guy, Osgood Brownlow came along, at least that's what he was calling himself at the time, is what Richard says.
Buck's dad.
So Richard implies that Osgood Brownlow is a fake name, and that he's this guy who lived in Millsburg, and that he was a big con artist. And I was like, there has to at least be a connection somehow to Buck or like his parents. I doubt it's his actual dad. And then it's like, we find out that this Osgood guy, so we know it's a fake name. He's a con artist. He lives in Millsburg. He has really weird sounding fake names, and that he's actually with this other woman. He's not actually with Richard's mom. He's seeing this other woman the whole time while he's pulling this con over on her. Millsburg is a town. It's not like, oh, it's a town and it's been used for stuff including Buck. It has only ever been mentioned with relation to Buck's story. And now Richard implies, like, we have Richard here with this fake, goofy-sounding name man who's also a con artist. It's too much of a coincidence. I do genuinely think that Osgood Brownlow is Buck's father. And and that would mean that Buck Oliver and Richard Maxwell are stepbrothers, technically.
Can I just say, I think you're right. I didn't even think about that.
As I was writing it out, I was like, this is a dumb joke. Tori's going to hate this. And as it kept going, and I was thinking about it, I was like...
This makes way too much sense.
I was like, I think this is actually true.
If it was like... If they canonically said back in album 5 all this stuff about Richard,
yeah,
and then they only mentioned that place like now again with Buck, I would think it was totally disconnected. But the fact that like this book was written so close to when that episode came out, because like we bought this book late.
Yeah, it came out in April, and the long end aired in spring of this year.
Yeah,
so it basically came out at the same time as the long end.
Yeah. So I think you're right.
And I don't know if it's going to be addressed or not.
Richard and Rachel are Buck's siblings.
Yeah.
What does this mean?
I know.
If I ship Connie and Richard...
Mm-hmm. Then that would mean that Buck would be Connie's brother-in-law, in addition to maybe also her future brother-in-law.
What is this?
I told you, the shipping gets so messy when you bring Buck and Jules and stuff into the question.
So, like, Connie and Jules are like, yeah, siblings. Let's go for it.
Yeah, 7 brides for 7 brothers.
This is like Everett and Eugene, but like on a whole new level. Like
yeah,
the
I
age
guess.
gap too.
I guess so. You're right.
I can't.
You know what? I just want to say I'm glad that you actually agree with me because I thought you were going to be really obstinate about this.
No, I thought you were going to have like a really dumb theory, but it's actually.
I thought it was a dumb
funky.
theory when I first started concocting it. I was going to say it as a joke, and then as he said more stuff, I was like, I think I'm actually right. It just lines up. There's too many things that line up.
Okay, timeline-wise, we don't know what year, I don't think, he left Rachel and the mom.
No, but there would still be enough time for him to leave and go back to like Dolly Tender, and then have Buck, and then die in a car accident or whatnot if he was really dead or whatever.
I can't believe it.
I'm sorry to break it to you. I was like,
this is interesting.
I was like going into the review. There's 2 things where I'm like, one is like I was right, Professor M is Carl Mongol, and also
well, I completely prove that.
Well, yeah, but coming in, I was like, that's one thing I didn't know before I knew you went back and did all this stuff. I didn't know if you'd remember his name well enough to be like, yes, I think it is actually him or not. And then the other thing was like Richard and Buck, and I was completely on the fence whether or not you would make that connection.
I did not, Richard, and I was too focused on like all the insanity.
That's valid.
Going on, all my crazy machinations. I want to talk about Richard and Connie, if that's okay.
Yeah, I only have like. Oh, I was going to say I really like getting inside Richard's head during all these scenes where he's manipulating people. It is also very similar to Buck because we get to see the analytical and codifying process behind what he says and does, like how he's thinking about like.
He's so cheesy. He's like already really cheesy. He's even cheesier inside his head. Like someone says something and he's just like, woo, bingo! Or someone does something and he's just like, heck yeah, 2 points. Like he's such a nerd. I love him. Also, his dad is... Back when I thought the flashback, like I knew it would be angsty from like his shaking in the past chapter. Yeah. But, like, when he was like, my dad was really into computers, I was kind of like, oh. And by the end of the chapter, I was like, oh. It's like that one vine.
That's basically all he has left of him.
It's like that one vine where he's just like, I want to be president. And he's like, oh, so I can make slavery legal again. You're like, oh. You know that vine I'm talking about, right?
Maybe.
Okay, I can show you after.
Okay.
It's the guy who did the I want to get funds so my brother will stop pushing me. It's that guy. Okay, so I have a lot of highlights. This entire page is highlighted, in fact. And like, it's the entire thing's highlighted. Things in front of it are highlighted. Things after the page are highlighted. It's a very big highlight. So Richard not only has huge abandonment issues and a lot of PTSD, he also has a really bad habit of projecting, like, not only himself, but also Rachel onto other people.
And animals.
Hurts me so much. And animals. Especially animals named Rachel. Very unfortunate for him. I'm never gonna get over that moment where I was just like, hey, Rachel! And his head was like, oh!
Literally, when I first noticed it in the book, I thought, that's interesting. Probably not gonna come up, though.
I saw that and I was just like, I wonder if Richard's gonna notice. And I was like, I wonder if Richard's gonna freak out because he can't save the horse named Rachel.
No, I literally saw it and I was like, yeah, they're probably never gonna mention that.
At first I was like, huh, that's funny, two Rachels. And then later I was like, oh, two Rachels.
It's like Batman v Superman.
Um,
Rachel.
Rachel.
Tom is like reaching for the horses, like Leah, Rachel, and then Richard's shaking Tom's wire. He's like, "Why did you say that name?"
Richard has a lot of problems, and they're all because of Rachel.
Yeah. Probably
but, like,
because of his
honestly,
bad
same.
parents.
Like, the thing that's been messing with me more than just Richard is just Richard and Rachel's relationship. That's been the thing I've been hyper focusing on ever since I read this book, because it's breaking my heart.
Honestly, I
Okay,
kind of forgot
so-
the fact that she was still in juvie now, and that wasn't just a thing that happened. That she's still
No,
out of commission at present, and
I
that's
want there to
messing me
be-
up now to think about.
Yeah, that's why I've been so upset.
know.
Because
Yeah, I
she's
get
still
it
in
now.
juvie, and he can't do anything about it.
Mhm.
And the thing is, he's going to go to the detention center right after this. So, like, I'm just imagining Homecoming, a scene where he goes to juvie, and she's all, like, upset and disgruntled because it's been so long. And
Yeah.
she's like, what are you doing
yeah.
here? And he's like, I got out of the detention center, I'm clean. She's like, yeah, I totally believe that. Get out of here. And
No, I feel like she would know, because...
Rachel's really, really mean.
Yeah.
Re-listen to Bad Company.
No,
She
I mean,
is
like, I feel
very
like she
mean.
might find out, like, in an official capacity that he ended up in the detention center.
I like to think that he visits her pretty regularly whenever he can.
Yeah.
And then one day he just stops visiting because he's in the detention center.
Okay, we
and he
need to
can't.
finish this, Victoria.
Okay, so Richard's projection issues. He projects Rachel onto literally every single woman in his life. So, like, at first it's Connie, and he realizes that by almost getting Connie a job, he would have been manipulating her in the same way he was manipulated as a kid, and Rachel was manipulated. And the line that kept on breaking me for the rest of the book, which I highlighted, I think, almost every single time, was Richard thinking that he had control over the situation
Mhm.
and then immediately losing control over the situation the
Yeah.
next second. So Richard was like, if Connie
She's just a
gets the
scared
job...
kid, man.
I'm so upset about Richard. The writing is so good. Homecoming is going to break me in all kinds of ways. Lucy getting injured and in the hospital and Richard going to see her, I'm gonna freaking
That was
cry
the other
that
thing
scene.
that made me think about, like, whether or not these books are intended for people, because they're like, here's a preview of book 4, and it's very like, Lucy's been hurt, but we're not saying why. Wits End is shutting down. I was like, we've all heard the episodes before. We know what's going to happen. We already know what happens.
The thing I'm going to be a little sad about is the time skip. I hope they go into a bit more detail about the summer-long time skip they do, basically.
Do you mean up until the beginning of the battle?
Yeah.
I imagine so, yeah. I wonder if they'll mention, like, our best vacation ever in as much context as needed for, like, the barn raising scene, at least.
They're definitely going to mention the barn raising. I don't think they're going to do our best vacation ever. 'Cause
Well,
it's
no,
not
I
really
just
relevant.
mean, I meant that scene specifically, which is in
Yeah.
our best vacation ever.
I think they'll mention it. I don't think they'll go into detail on the whole barn raising.
I'm really curious to see if the books eventually finally, like, prove 100% that I was correct, that, like, the RGB Foundation is, like, Regis Black, or the RBG is, like, Regis Blackguard Foundation, and that he
Probably.
bought Edgebiter so that he could make that donation to Tom and, like, create that controversy regarding election donations.
We'll find out in like 2 books.
It's like, it's very much implied, but I want to find out how that whole Edgebiter acquisition process happened from Blackguard's perspective. Also, I want to find out what he had on Mayor Perkins, or Mill Jenkins,
too.
sorry, no, Bill Jenkins. I was thinking
We're
about
definitely
that
going to find that
earlier
out, though.
today. Also, it's still weird to me that he's Ashley's dad, because
Yeah.
he must have been so old when he had her.
Yeah, we've talked about that before,
I know.
though.
He's like, hey, I'm in 2 episodes in the like the golden era, early, like, silver era, and then I show up in album 45.
Okay, so Richard basically projects onto Connie that, like, he doesn't want her to be involved with Blackguard anymore because he wants to protect her from Blackguard and his negative influence, and he doesn't want like Connie to be manipulated in the same way he was.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is such good shipping fuel. I never thought I'd ever get anything like this, but I'm like living. This is amazing. It's like me laying prone with all the hearts, like the Kermit picture is me. And I was also thinking of like, I was thinking of just like a bunch of memes I wanted to make of just like, thank you, Phil, for this. This is so good.
I was so worried because the only thing I really got for a point was like you sending the Vine of like, at Phil, I can't believe you've done this. And it was which I assumed was related to the Young Wit stuff, and it was.
Yeah. So basically,
but I also thought there was a chance that he did some other completely different Buck Wild thing, which he did. He made Richard and Buck brothers. So.
Yeah. Oh man. So Richard starts obsessing over control and stuff like that, which I don't blame him. He's had a really rough life. It makes sense. So he realizes that like if Connie gets the job with Blackguard or gets anywhere close to Blackguard, just Richard won't be able to help her at all, and he'll completely lose her and something horrible will happen to her. And he doesn't want that to happen because he has a very big heart and it's been broken too many times. I'm dying. And so he convinces Lucy to help him get Connie to get the job back, which I don't know. I originally thought like that was 100% Blackguard. Now I'm thinking that was mostly just Richard, and Richard was just told to like distract like Wit in any way. He didn't have to get Connie to get the job back. I think he just did that because he cares about Connie.
You know what?
Because he has a lot of it. He's like, I've had Connie for 20 seconds, and if anything happened to her, I'd kill everyone in the room and then myself.
You know what I just realized, Victoria? My like OG kooky AIO headcanon was that Buck was biologically related to like Regis Blackguard.
Yeah.
And now the reality comes out. The truth is out. Mm-hmm. Buck is sort of adopted to like the second mainest character in the Blackguard saga.
Yep.
So it's different than what I thought, but shockingly closer to true than it literally anyone would have ever predicted.
Unfortunately, you are correct. Screw you. Are you proud of yourself?
You have no idea.
Yeah, I bet you are, you piece of garbage. Anyway, so Richard realizes that like he can't have any...
It's sad to me that I can't put this revelation into like the teasing preview stuff when I post this episode in any way that will be adequately able to communicate just how much it is not clickbait or a joke.
I mean, you can try. It won't work, though.
It won't work.
So Richard realizes the only way he can have any control over what's going on with Connie is if he uses Lucy, which he doesn't consider to be using Lucy because he's in control of the situation and Blackguard isn't like actively harming or using Lucy. It's just Richard like coercing her, which is the exact same thing that happened to Richard as a kid. Basically, he's just trying to reframe it in his mind as like, see, I have more control in this situation, so it's fine. Yeah. Which actively, like every sentence is followed up with, "Oh no, I'm losing control of the situation. What do I do?"
I thought it was really good in terms of looking at like the thought processes of people who are a victim of that kind of like emotional manipulation like that. That he has this continual repetitive cycle of being like, yes, I am doing this because I'm trying to break out of the cycle of events like before, but then also seeking the mental validation of like, yes, this is what Osgood would have thought I'm doing a good job right here. And then having to stop himself.
That part where he was just like, Osgood would be proud of you, and I was just like, no, and then Richard just stopped
because he needs that because of his abandonment issues. He needs that validation. And so he keeps on coming back and forth through this cycle of like, needing the validation before remembering that that's a bad thing and trying to break away from it, but then having no emotional support structure.
And he feels like
again.
the only thing he still has that's worth holding on to is Rachel, so he projects that onto literally everything.
Yeah.
Do you see why I said Richard's now one of the deepest characters in all of Odyssey?
Yes.
Like,
we should probably stop the recording again. And
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, so second intermission, we're almost done, as you can tell from the timestamp, I swear. Please let us be almost done. Okay, time for the final act that should be short. I only really have one more note at this point, and it is, what do June and Connie consider regular milk? Because Connie's like, they were out of regular milk, so I got 2%.
Yeah, that's
instead.
what I was thinking. I was like, what's wrong with you people?
I was like, what is...
I guess 1%?
To my mind, 2% is default milk. And bear in mind, I don't buy 2% milk. I buy 1%. But in my mind, 2% is the default. So what is regular milk?
What time period was this?
What
in this time, what was the default?
I don't know. But it's also like an American thing, right? Like, we have homogenized milk here. Homo milk, not a thing in America, as far as I'm aware. So, like, do they buy whole milk? That's a lot of cream to always get. My best guess is, 1%. But that would be a weird way to say, like, they were out of 1%, so I got 2%. Is they were out of regular milk, so I got 2%.
I mean, it might be regular milk for their household.
I know, but that's still a weird way to word, like, they were out of 1, so I got 2.
I don't know. They should have just kept the line the same from the episode.
That's what it is.
This is what happens when you change it. I don't think so, that wording specifically.
I think it is. I could be wrong. I don't know.
I could be wrong. Oh, Richard, blah, 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 blah.
I mean, in fairness, Connie says it pretty offhandedly, because she says it over June being like, Connie, the store called, the shop called. Wit wants to meet with you. Sorry.
Okay, I kind of do want to read this monologue. It'll take a minute or so, because I just thought it was really, really good. He scowled at the bitter taste of bile these recollections erupted in him, disgust for his folks for dumping the responsibility for Rachel on him, loathing for Brownlow for corrupting her, and hatred for himself for not fighting to stay and at least trying to protect her. Like, oh, Rachel. A thought struck him, and his eyes snapped open. Yesterday, he had tried to help Blackguard do to Connie what Brownlow had done to Rachel. Take a completely innocent girl and corrupt her. This is so painful. And here he was in wit's end, about to do it again. How had he not seen this? He couldn't let it happen. He wouldn't. But Blackguard had shown yesterday that he was not a man to be denied. And Blackguard would have no compunction against personally using physical violence in pursuit of his goals. Maxwell had to follow through. He had no choice. Then a different thought struck him. If his goal was now to prevent Blackguard from corrupting Connie, then what he was about to do would fulfill that goal and satisfy Blackguard, wouldn't it? And just like that, the nefarious scheme he had planned became ennobled in his mind. He smiled broadly, pleased at his ingenuity. He'd need at least more cleverness to complete the rest of what Blackguard had tasked him to do without anyone getting hurt. He knew he could ennoble that somehow as well. He was back in control. Like, that monologue is so well written.
It is
taking
very
a character... Like, this is why I said I think this chapter specifically is the best piece of writing I've ever seen from Phil. Like, that bit at the end, Richard taking something he's completely opposed to doing, taking and drawing in his, like, past experiences and his goals and his ideals, and then warping it into a way to make, like, a shift in his decision, which leads to the end of the story and, like, changes his objectives and goals, is so well written. It's so smooth. Like, Phil did such a good job writing this book. I'm so impressed.
I like when it says, like, Richard smiles as he has ennobled it in his mind, and it basically shows it wasn't
Smiles
like...
broadly. I smiled broadly.
I really like the way how it shows that the chain of thought here was not, I think about the thing I don't want to do more, and then I realize, oh, you know what, this is the right thing to do, so I guess I'll do it after all. The chain of thought is, I have to do this thing, but I don't want to do it. If I think about it like this, I guess that would be a way to justify it's good. And then he smiles because he realizes that he had to do this thing either way, but now he is able to figure out a way that he can justify to himself being able to do it. Because he would have done it either way.
Also,
but he smiles. He smiles because he has now figured out a way to justify it to himself, even though he knows that's what he's doing. But because he knows that even though it's self-aware, that now he'll be able to bring himself to carry out what he knows Blackroot will force him to do anyways.
And the fact that he's specifically talking about trying to figure out how to be clever enough to do all of this without anyone getting hurt.
Yeah.
Is like a huge part of that. Because, like I predicted, later at the end of the book when he's setting the fire, he tries to set the fire a little bit like in front of the barn.
Yeah.
So it actually won't, because we haven't talked about this bit in the recap at all. So it won't like actually affect the barn or anything like that. But Richard is a clumsy, idiotic oaf. And he's a bad arsonist.
He is a very bad arsonist.
Richard is bad at arson. He accidentally gets gasoline on his shirt. So I don't know about you, but I kept on thinking about this crazy mad lad, shirtless, with wild eyes, running, flailing through the woods, getting away from the fire.
When he ripped his shirt off and the shirt burned, but it said that his buttons popped off the shirt when he ripped it off, and I thought
he's too buff. He's just like, and he flexes it.
That's going to be a plot point that they're going to find the buttons.
I think that's still going to happen.
Arson proof. Yeah, it felt a little too pointed out to me to not be like foreshadowing.
I read that and I was like, they're going to find the buttons. They're going to match it up.
Yeah,
they're going to know
because the shirt
Richard
went into the fire. The shirt is getting incinerated, but the buttons flew off where Richard was standing, which presumably did not get burnt, which means they're not going to be melted beyond recognition, and Tom is going to know those buttons do not belong to him.
Yep. So, yeah, I picked up on that too. I'm glad you did, because I totally forgot to mention it. So Richard accidentally throws his shirt at the barn right after Tom leaves, and it hits it, and then it like hits a pile of hay, and it ignites, and Richard is figuring out a way to try and put out the fire because he's like freaking out. Can I just say the scene is everything I wanted it to be, mostly because I predicted everything that would happen before it happened. I was very proud of myself. I was also freaking out while I was reading it. So it was so interesting, though, because it kept on cutting between, like, I think it was Connie or Whit's point of view.
Yeah.
And also Tom's at one point. And Richard's. It was, like, constantly volleying between them, mostly Richard's point of view.
I was very curious to find
They
out.
were literally, like, that far away from each other.
Yeah.
Just on opposite sides of the building, both trying to put out the fire, both trying to help the horses, both trying to save Tom's life. And I was, like, freaking out. Because I don't know about you, I've always thought about, like, wondered where Richard was during the end of the Nemesis, but I always figured he was, like, off the property by the time the fire actually happened. Listening to this, I realized, and hearing his backstory, I realized he's way too sympathetic towards others.
Yeah.
And there's no way he wouldn't still be on the property.
The thing I was curious to learn from this scene was, how did Tom get knocked out? And I was surprised. It was basically a grease fire, I guess, basically.
And almost. It was completely Richard's fault.
Yeah, he threw the water onto the kerosene, and then it exploded, and it knocked Richard through the air, and on the other side of the wall, it knocked Tom unconscious.
Yeah. They just got really, really beaten up.
Yeah.
In that scene, both of them. Like, honestly,
also,
if it
his,
for the fact that one landed in the fire, I'd say they got equally beat up. Richard got, like, all singed.
Yeah, and I was like, that is suspicious.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. He, like, has to go by eyeliner, pencils,
I was
and
picturing
just,
him, like, shaving his head and his eyebrows and trying to pass it off as, like, fashion when the police come to him.
Richard's a disaster. Like, that's the biggest thing I've gleaned from these books, is just, like, him with his cheap, overdosed cologne, being bad at arson, accidentally setting literally everything on fire except for the one thing he's trying to set on fire, and just burning off his eyebrows and doing all these other things, and just, he doesn't know what he's doing. I feel bad for him. Getting fired from everywhere he tries to work at. I'm a Renaissance man because I can't hold a job. I just keep on going to every job and they keep on firing me. That's why I've done so many things.
I mean, yeah, I guess.
I'm not wrong.
You aren't.
Oh my gosh,
We need
Richard.
to wrap this up because we've been recording for
Disaster boy.
3.5 hours. I'm supposed to be in bed in half an hour and I haven't eaten dinner yet.
I haven't either. I'm supposed to be in bed already. Okay, let me see.
The book was 5 out of 5, honestly. I just want to get that out of the way because I'm done with my notes.
Oh yeah, definitely. I still have some notes left. The book was more than 5 out of 5 stars for me.
This book was better than the first two put together, I could say, I think, reasonably. Which I didn't think was possible after the first two.
Okay. So this is when he was convincing. So going back a little bit, we already talked about this scene, but I actually want to read it because it was another piece of really good writing. When he was convincing Lucy to help him with, like, setting up Connie and Whit with the thing. Okay. She looked off but didn't pull her hand away. Come on, come on. She took a deep breath and said hesitantly, "Tell me what I have to do again?" Yes! He felt a familiar rush of excitement, the conquest, the play, slowly reeling in the mark until finally, the score. This hurts so bad.
It reminds me so much of Buck episodes.
It's like Buck, yeah. There was no better feeling, just as Brownlow had taught him. He stopped. A lump suddenly appeared in his throat. It hurt so bad, and a pang of guilt stabbed his conscience. He froze for a moment and shook it off. No, this is different. Yes, he was using Lucy, but this time he was using someone for good, to protect Connie. Yeah, that's it. He needs to justify everything. And he would protect Lucy too. He could handle this. I'm still in control. And Lucy's like, Richard, are you okay? And he's just like,
completely dissociated.
Richard has so many issues.
Just think about like this though, Victoria. For a little amount of Richard, like, kind of in-depth character stuff that we got during album 5, and this is what we're getting for it now. Imagine what's going to happen once we get to album 10 and album 25, where they actually do deep dive into Richard in the show.
Dude, you don't think I've thought about that?
I know you talk about Homecoming a lot, but think about
day.
like all of the Tom Richard stuff in Darkness Before Dawn.
I'm wondering about how much of 10 is going to be from his point of view, considering he doesn't show up until halfway through Waylaid.
Yeah. I'm curious of how much in-between stuff they're going to tell us about Blackbird between 5 and 10.
I don't know.
I mean, we're going to have to get stuff from One Bad Apple, definitely, but that's not going to involve Blackbird because he presumably didn't own Edgebiter yet at that point.
Do you think Richard's going to show up, like, far before the actual sewer scene? I'm hoping he does.
I'm sure we'll get earlier stuff. I'm sure we'll get stuff that kind of reminds us that he knew Greg Kelly and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that Greg Kelly was the one who...
Wait, he talks about the fact that he knew Greg Kelly in Waylaid, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And in this, he says that Greg Kelly is the one who told Blackbird about Richard. So It's like, thanks for that. And then, of course, we know later Greg Kelly is going to get murdered by Blackbird.
I'm really looking forward to the scene where he infiltrates the base in 25 and then he rolls out of the car and stuff. I'm so excited for that. Do you think Rachel's gonna show up?
What in 25 or in general?
I mean, like, in general in this book series.
Oh yeah, 1000%. She has to. This is the Richard series. And she is clearly...
Okay, do you agree? This has become Richard Maxwell, the series.
Yeah. He has more
He's the protagonist of this
than
series.
Anyone else, and Rachel is his primary character motivation. She has to show up.
He better visit her in Homecoming, is all I'm saying. Okay.
Or before then, even. We might see him do that at... Oh, wait, he goes to the detention center. Maybe Whit tries and makes it so that he gets to visit Rachel before he goes to the detention center.
Oh. The scene with Richard, like, visiting Lucy in the hospital, I'm gonna cry.
I'm hoping that they will confirm, and I feel like at this point it's pretty obvious, but confirm in the battle when Richard has that fight with Blackbird, and Blackbird's like, "You sniveling little coward, I've spent the last 5 years trying to get into this town." It's like
He's
5 years.
5 years? Like,
Yeah.
Nathan Carlson's line reading on 5 years and his voice cracking is just like, mwah, perfection. Nathan Carlson's such a good voice actor.
My long-held theory, which I feel like is pretty much confirmed logically at this point, that the reason that he spent all those 5 years wasn't just waiting for the property to open up, but he spent those years getting
He spent those years digging the tunnel from the Electric Palace.
with a spoon. Yeah, no. He spent all that time, like, also getting his doctorate in child psychology, because
I always assumed that.
before the Fillmore Center, there's literally no reason that he would have gotten a degree in that. And then after it went to Wits End, he's like, well, if I get into the town, I need to do something like Wits End. I need credibility, so I'm going to do this. And it makes the timeline make sense. 5 years, that's about how long, if you were going fast, you could squeeze in getting a PhD.
Yeah.
Especially if you already had a bachelor's degree. I mean.
The line that broke me. He spied the horses' nameplates attached to their stall gates. Leah and Rachel. His sister's image flashed through his mind. Rachel.
I know.
I was like, no. Okay, so Richard is trying to put out the fire. Tom is brought out by Connie and Whit. Richard runs off. How does this end?
When Connie comes out of the house, first off, I thought it was funny, coming back to technology, when they arrive at the fire and Whit has to tell Connie to go into Tom's house so that she can call the fire department, which I was like, I guess the barn isn't connected, so that's not as dangerous as it sounds, but it's still not a good idea to go into the building in general right now. And I was like, but I guess there was no other way to call the fire department back then because we didn't have cell phones.
Because this book is full of pain, I don't know about you, but this line really, really hurt me. The front wall and door frame now collapsed to the ground. Tom watched in anguish.
Yeah.
But why would anyone want to set my barn on fire, Whit? Tears streamed down his cheeks. Why? And I was just imagining them, like, messing with, like, all the soot on his face.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I get the tear. It's also, like, from shock and also because his eyes are full of smoke and he's suffering from
I didn't even think about that fact. And then it ends with,
he'd
like,
barely be able to see at this
Blackard getting the business license. It's just a massive white.
Also, when Connie comes out of the house after phoning the fire department, and she has a pitcher and glasses of water, and I thought that was so that she was going to throw it on the barn, and then I realized that it was for Tom to drink because he had smoke inhalation.
I don't know about you, but I gave this book 5 stars on Goodreads. This book has, like, I think 2 or 3 reviews on Goodreads. All are 5 stars. And I was like, yeah, one of them's me. But I was like, these other 2 people have good taste.
I feel like we've already said everything we can say about the book. 5 out of 5, absolutely. Richard novel. Richard saga.
Richard saga.
It is so good, and they did such a fantastic job at developing Richard, both in terms of plot and in terms of, like, character development and analysis. Everything with Richard in here is so good. So many great connections. I can't believe I didn't put together, now thinking back on it, that we knew that Mrs. Hooper's daughter's married name was Mansfield, which is the same name as the computer shop.
See, the thing is, while reading these books, you and I have never once actually listened to Album 5 again, is the thing. We're just going off of our memory.
No, but it's good because it makes things more surprising.
It does, yeah.
Even though it would be cool to figure those things out.
We still know everything inside out anyway, basically.
You know what? You know what I always hold as, like, the best prediction for Odyssey stuff is the fact that when I was listening to initially, I figured out in advance that Bart worked, like, the first time I listened to Darkness Before Dawn, I figured out before it was revealed that Bart was working for Blackard because I remembered that the Electric Palace was sponsored by the Webster Development Firm, which tried to buy the Fillmore, and Blackard also said he tried to build the Fillmore, so that must mean that Blackard actually owns Bart's business, and that's why Bart is doing all of these things. And I put that all together before the first time that I actually, like, heard that revealed that he was working for Blackard.
I don't know about you, but I had, like, a pretty good idea of, like, what I wanted Richard's happily ever after to be at 25. It has completely radically shifted after reading this book. I want his happily ever after to be him and Rachel are reunited and they can heal together. Because that is, like, the perfect ending, in my opinion, for Richard. That is... I'm gonna, like, go cry myself to sleep over this. Like, Dude, I never thought we'd get this much Rachel stuff. I've never cared about Rachel more than I have this past week. Like, I never thought they would really talk about her at all in these books when I first started them, let alone do a deep dive like this.
Oh, it's good. We need to stop here, but yeah, it's good content.
We do.
It is very good content.
I need her to show up in the books. I need her to show up so
These books are so good. Please go read
they're
them.
like unbelievably good.
Just for the 6 sentences left in the books that you haven't already like gleaned from hearing us talk about them. For that, the rest of that content you haven't gotten yet, go purchase and read them, please.
So the next book is just gonna be the battle, right?
Yeah, it should be.
Okay.
The cover of the book is
the cover of the next book is Richard trapped under the Zapazoid machine.
Yeah.
Which, if you want to see the cover in the next book, Devin.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's everything for today.
Good job, Phil.
I hope people made it. I hope someone made it to the end of this review.
I'll probably rewatch this review.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
For being the one brave soul. So, that's everything we have to talk about for today. What are we talking about next time, Victoria?
Nothing matters anymore other than this book. So, like, Camp in a Hard Place Part 2 and Bad Company.
Yeah.
Because I need desperately to talk about Rachel more.
Here's the thing that's interesting to me, Victoria. So, for these books, the first big kind of, like, crazy plot thing is, like, oh, the Young Wit books and the Blackguard books are crossing over because of the magical healing cloth and, like, the ancient journal of the McClintocks and such.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah, it is weird. But because both of these books are coming out at the same time, they're unfolding the information at the same time in a way that allows them to both reference each other. And I assume there's going to be some kind of convergence somehow, even though they take place many decades apart.
It's like a Marvel movie,
it is,
but not.
It is, really. Here's the thing. If they are really trying to confirm that Richard and Buck are stepbrothers, do you think that there is going to be anything more to that end in the books, or is it going to be left at that? And if so, how?
I think it's going to be left at that.
Either in the audio show or in the books, how on earth would they explain that in a way that makes sense? Because Buck probably isn't...
is Buck even alive yet?
I don't know.
He might not be alive yet.
I know. That's so, big question marks there. They could just leave it at that. Here's the thing that was interesting to me, though. I don't remember if it was very heavy implication or stated as fact when the first time Richard mentions Osgood's name that it was a fake name. I don't remember if that was implied or if he said it for a fact that it was a fake name, but then through the rest of his story and all the con stuff, he never says when or how he found out it was a fake name, which makes me wonder if there's more backstory to unpack there that will come later that will also involve his real name or some of his other aliases, which will confirm definitively that he is the same person as Buck's father.
I have no idea. One last thing I wanted to say really quick is you brought up the fact that Richard mentions going to see his folks in the Homecoming, which, I don't know, I always felt like there was something a little off with that line.
Me too.
Listening to it.
Because I was like, why didn't you do that already?
Yeah, and I think the thing now is he was probably lying.
It was a big, fat, phony lie.
Because he don't got no folks. He orphan.
He's literally incapable of seeing them because he doesn't know where any of them are.
He was abandoned by literally every single person in his life except for Rachel, who was torn away from him.
Yeah. Eugene does have a lot in common with Richard now that I think about it.
Yeah, I've always been a sucker for Richard and Eugene's friendship. I am really, really looking forward to the scenes of them like bonding over technology stuff.
Well, especially because that's the same point where Eugene is in his absolute nadir of abandonment issues, where it goes from just beyond like his parents and other people in his life to abandoned by Katrina, abandoned by Wit.
Dude, they can become abandonment buddies.
I know, and then Wit's End closes down. Like, The Time Has Come is his absolute lowest point of all of his abandonment issues coming together. And that is the same time when Richard also happens to be hanging around them.
Hey, since we're rewriting all the episodes, Time Has Come, Redux, Eugene and Richard both become Christians at the same time.
Okay, we need to stop this here. So next time we're talking about Between Camp and a Hard Place, we're talking about Bad Company, and you're just going to get more of this all over again.
Yeah, I kept on yelling when I was listening to Bad Company every 10 seconds when Rachel was upset. Richard's trying, Rachel. He's trying his best to raise you.
I know. So that's what we're doing next time. Until then, thank you for joining us on our side of YouTube. I've been Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner.
And we both really need to sleep.
And eat.
And eat.
Yeah. This has been the Adventures Nazi Oddcast. Goodbye.
Goodbye.